Have you noticed how hard it is lately to stay with one thought? Not because you're lazy, not because you're weak, but because your mind keeps slipping away from you, like it's searching for something it doesn't even know it's missing. And it's not just distraction anymore. It's a kind of mental drift. Quiet, unnoticed, like being half awake in your own life. And maybe what's worse than losing your focus is not realizing how long it's been gone. Because it didn't happen all at once. It wasn't loud. It didn't break. It just faded. One skipped pause at a time. One rushed moment. One, I'll think about it later. You stopped protecting your mind's stillness because noise became normal. Speed became survival. And stillness started feeling like failure. And so you learned to keep moving, to stay stimulated, to fill the silence fast before it reminded you of something you didn't want to hear. The moment you lost your focus, you started losing your presence. You stopped feeling rooted in anything, stopped feeling depth in the things you used to love, stopped finishing things you once cared about because your attention got stretched so thin that nothing could hold it long enough to reach you. And now, even when life slows down, you can't. Even when you want to be present, you feel like you're watching yourself from just slightly outside your own body. Detached, drifting, there, but not really there. And you might think you just need more discipline, or a new habit tracker, or another productivity app. But what you actually need is to understand why you handed over your focus in the first place, and why it still has more power over you than you realize. The problem with losing your focus isn't just that you get less done. It's that you slowly start becoming a stranger to your own life. Your days blur. Your thoughts feel like visitors instead of something you chose to think. And your emotions? They kind of get dull around the edges. Not numb, exactly. Just muted. Like life is happening slightly behind glass. You're aware of it, but it's not touching you the way it used to. And at first, you don't even notice. You blame it on being tired, or overstimulated, or just going through a lot right now. And sure, maybe that's true, but if you're honest, it's been like this for a while. And somewhere in that blur, you stop showing up for your own thoughts. You stop finishing your sentences when you're alone. You stop asking yourself questions that don't have fast answers. You start replacing depth with dopamine. One little ping at a time, one more scroll, one more tiny hit of new. And sure, on the surface, nothing's wrong. You're still functioning, still getting things done, still responding, smiling, checking in, checking out. But deep down, you're not really with yourself anymore. You're just rotating through tasks, trying to stay busy enough not to notice the fog you're carrying. And the scariest part, it starts to feel normal. You forget what real mental clarity even felt like. You convince yourself this haze is just what adulthood is. And yeah, sure, adulthood comes with distractions, decisions, dishes, and enough tabs open in your mind to crash an old laptop. But that's not what this is. This is something quieter, more dangerous. Because when you lose your focus, you don't just lose productivity, you lose intimacy with yourself. You stop noticing your own signals. You forget how to hear your intuition when it whispers. You stop recognizing the gap between I'm fine and I'm not okay, but I can't slow down long enough to figure out why. That's not just being distracted. That's being pulled, controlled, by habits you didn't consciously choose, by systems designed to steal your attention, by a version of life that rewards urgency and punishes depth. And maybe you've adjusted so well that you barely feel it, but your nervous system knows, your emotions know, your creativity knows. They've all been patiently waiting for you to notice how far you've wandered from your own inner rhythm. And the moment you slow down long enough to feel that truth, you realize this isn't about getting more done. This is about remembering how to be here again, not just existing in your mind, but actually feeling connected to it, And no, you're not weak for struggling with that. You're just human, with a brain that's been overfed, overstimulated, and underheard. The truth is, regaining your focus doesn't feel like power. It feels like withdrawal. Because when you've gotten used to your mind being pulled in every direction, stillness doesn't feel peaceful. It feels wrong. It feels boring, empty, almost like you're doing something wrong just by not doing enough. And maybe that's why so many people stay stuck in distraction, because when it finally gets quiet, you realize how loud your thoughts have actually been. But that's where the return begins. Not in discipline, not in a perfect morning routine, not in deleting every app and pretending that'll fix it. It begins in sitting with yourself long enough to hear what your mind has been trying to say beneath all the noise. It starts when you wake up, and instead of reaching for your phone, you just sit there, even if it's only for 30 seconds, even if it feels pointless. And yeah, your brain's going to itch. It's going to reach for anything: a to-do list, a notification, a plan, a distraction dressed as urgency. But if you can sit through that, even just a little, you're already shifting something. You're telling your nervous system, hey, I'm still here. I can slow down. I can listen again. And that's not some motivational line. It's literally how your brain starts rewiring, not in massive leaps, not in dramatic breakthroughs, but in tiny, consistent moments where you reclaim your attention by not giving it away so fast. You don't have to go off the grid. You don't have to meditate for 3 hours a day. You don't need to become a productivity machine with color-coded priorities. You just need to give yourself space to be a person again, not a processor, not a content consumer, not a reaction machine, just a human being, in your body, in your moment. And yeah, you'll fail at it. A lot. You'll drift. You'll scroll. You'll forget what you were trying to remember. But that's okay, because focus isn't about perfection. It's about returning over and over again to what matters, even if it's awkward, even if it's inconvenient, even if nobody else sees the effort it takes to slow down, especially then, because that's when it matters most. When it's hard, when it's boring, when it feels like nothing is happening, but deep down, you know that something is changing. And that quiet shift, that's how you begin, not with force, but with presence. And maybe the hardest part of all this is realizing that losing your focus didn't just make life harder. It made you feel different, because when your attention is always scattered, you don't just forget where you placed your keys, you forget who you are in the stillness. And that's the part nobody tells you. That focus isn't just about attention spans or productivity or screen time limits. It's about identity. It's about presence. It's about being able to stay with yourself, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, without constantly needing an escape hatch. Because when you can't focus, you can't connect. Not deeply, not with your work, not with other people, not even with yourself. Everything becomes surface. Everything becomes just enough to get through it. You feel like you're there, but not fully, like you're living your life in half sentences. And maybe that's the real cost. Not that you're behind on projects or forgetting tasks, but that you no longer feel in sync with yourself. Like you've been replaced with a faster version of you that knows how to keep up, but doesn't know how to be still. Or true, and it's subtle. You still laugh. You still get things done. You still check in with people. But underneath that, something's missing. And it's hard to explain to anyone because it's not exactly pain. It's more like emotional static. And when you try to reconnect with that quieter part of yourself, you realize just how long it's been since you really checked in. You've built systems, routines, and entire days around avoiding that stillness. And you're good at it. You've survived on it. But survival isn't presence. It's not connection. It's not joy. And if you're honest, you miss it. Not some big change. Not some breakthrough. Just the feeling of being fully with yourself. Focused. Clear. Rooted in one thing, without being pulled apart by 5 others. And that's what real focus gives you. not just productivity, not just sharper thinking, but a place to return to, a center, a presence. And without that center, you can achieve a lot and still feel completely disconnected from your own life, because being effective isn't the same as being present. And maybe the reason you're tired all the time isn't because you're doing too much, but because you're doing it all from the outside in, disconnected, scattered, and quietly, completely overwhelmed. Here's something most people never say out loud. When your focus is fractured for long enough, you stop feeling safe inside your own mind. Not unsafe like panic, but unsafe like you can't relax there. You can't rest. You can't sit in your own head without feeling like something's about to slip away. And so you start avoiding it, without realizing that the more you avoid that inner space, the more unfamiliar it becomes. You begin treating your own thoughts like strangers. You hear them, but you don't trust them. You're never sure if what you're feeling is real, or just another reflex reaction to overstimulation. You become suspicious of your own stillness. You second-guess your clarity. You hesitate to commit to anything because your attention's been borrowed so many times. You no longer know what's truly yours. And that confusion, that mental uncertainty, it quietly becomes your new baseline. You don't spiral. You drift. You wake up already tired. You move through conversations half aware. You open your mouth to say something and forget what it was mid-sentence. And you brush it off. Because who has time to worry about a mind that's just a little fuzzy? But over time, you stop initiating deep thoughts. You stop chasing ideas that take time to unfold. You stop asking the kinds of questions that require more than 2 seconds of focus. And without knowing it, you start shrinking. Not physically, not visibly, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. You reduce yourself to what's manageable, what's quick, what's reactive, what fits into the current speed of the world around you. And yeah, maybe that keeps you functional, but it doesn't keep you whole, because the version of you that knows how to feel deeply, think clearly, and move deliberately, that version can't live on borrowed attention. It needs silence, it needs space, it needs consistency. And if you've been feeling disconnected, foggy, indecisive, exhausted without knowing why, maybe it's not a personality flaw. Maybe it's not anxiety. Maybe it's just your mind waving a quiet flag, asking you to slow down, long enough to remember how to be inside yourself again. Because focus isn't just about getting back control of your day. It's about getting back your ability to feel safe in your own mind again, to stop flinching from stillness, to stop assuming every silence needs to be filled, to build a place inside of you that doesn't demand constant output, but welcomes quiet awareness. And it doesn't come back just because you want it to. It comes back because you make space for it. And that's hard, but it's also exactly where everything starts to shift. There's something really strange that happens. When you live in a state of scattered attention for long enough, you stop recognizing the person you thought you were becoming. Not because you gave up on your goals, not because you lost motivation, but because your relationship with yourself has become fragmented. You've spent so much time jumping between tabs, between tasks, between tiny moments of stimulation, that you never land long enough to ask yourself what you actually want anymore. You don't feel in control of your direction because you're too busy reacting to everything around you. You don't even realize it at first because you're still moving. You're still busy. You're still checking boxes, setting reminders, updating calendars. But underneath all that, there's no center. There's no thread connecting today to something deeper, something honest, something meaningful. And so even when you try to make progress, it doesn't feel like your progress. It feels like you're just following momentum, like you're being carried by the noise. Instead of moved by something inside of you, you start picking up goals that aren't really yours. You start chasing versions of success that look good online, but feel hollow in your chest. And eventually, you stop trusting your own vision, because every time you try to focus on it, your attention slips. And that slip, it gets internalized. You start believing you're scattered, unfocused, bad with consistency, too easily distracted to follow through on anything long enough to become real. But maybe that's not true. Maybe the problem isn't that you're undisciplined. Maybe it's just that you've never been taught how to protect your attention like it's sacred. Because it is. Your attention is the foundation of your identity. Whatever you give it to grows, and whatever you fragment it across weakens. And if you've been giving your attention to everything, everywhere, all at once, then of course your sense of self feels thin. Of course your direction feels unclear. Of course you don't feel rooted in your own choices anymore. It's not that you've lost who you are, it's that your attention has been stretched so far. You haven't had a moment to sit with that version of you, long enough to remember what they sound like. Because clarity doesn't come from doing more. It comes from stillness, from giving your mind the room to speak before someone else speaks through it, from letting your thoughts finish without rushing to the next thing. And that takes intention, not pressure, not guilt, just space. And the scary thing is, if you don't slow down long enough to notice how far you've drifted, you start building a life on top of a self you don't even feel connected to anymore. And maybe that's why you've been tired, not just physically, but soul tired. Like your body's moving, but the part of you that used to feel alive inside that movement has been left behind, waiting for you to come back. So if something in you slowed down today, even just for a moment, leave one word in the comments here. Not for anyone else, just as a reminder to yourself that you're still with you. And like always, enjoy your day, my friend. You're not lost. You're here.